The moment froze in a way that made everyone present understand something irreversible was happening, but no one moved to stop it as the seconds ticked by in terrible slow motion. Lance Sergeant Thompson felt the hand on his face before he could register the movement, a touch that was light, almost gentle, the way you'd pat a child or a dog, and the woman's fingers lingered on his cheek for 3 full seconds that would change everything. 3 seconds that would end her vacation, make Thompson famous for reasons he never wanted, and finally force the question no one wanted to answer. How much disrespect can a soldier absorb before the system breaks? The cameras captured everything from 8 different phones at multiple angles, creating perfect evidence of the moment. When a Royal Guard and active duty British soldier standing ceremonial duty was treated like an attraction at a theme park rather than a human being with dignity and rights. But here's what those cameras did uncapture: the weight of the decision forming in Thompson's mind, the calculation happening behind eyes trained to show nothing, and the silent crossing of a threshold that once breached could never be uncrossed. The woman stepped back with a laugh, her tour group laughing with her as someone made a joke in Korean. And the footage would be uploaded within minutes with hashtags like #RoyalGuard, #Buckingham Palace, #funny, except it wasn't funny at all. What happened next would prove that some lines, once crossed, come with consequences no one anticipated. And this particular crossing would send shockwaves through social media, law enforcement, and the British military establishment. The statistics tell a story most tourists never see. Since 2019, incidents requiring verbal warnings from the Queen's Guard have increased by 340%. Turning rare occurrences into daily battles that drain the patience and dignity of every soldier on ceremonial duty. Physical contact with ceremonial horses has become so routine that the carefully selected, extensively trained animals have begun responding with defensive behaviors, including bites, aggressive head movements, and ears pinned back in clear warning. Thompson had completed 2 combat tours before rotating onto ceremonial duty, been under fire in Helmand Province, and made split-second life-or-death decisions, but nothing in combat prepared him for the psychological warfare of standing motionless while strangers treated him as less than human. The morning started at 0530 hours with inspection, where every button was checked and every piece of equipment scrutinized. Then the bearskin cap settled onto his head with familiar pressure, marking the beginning of another shift. By 0700, tourists had begun gathering with the usual behaviors: phones raised, questions shouted asking, "Can you smile? And do you ever move?" And Thompson remained perfectly still because this was the contract, the unspoken agreement that made ceremonial duty possible. The tour group arrived at 0815 with a professional guide positioning 23 people at the appropriate distance, but one woman in her mid-30s separated herself from the group, and Thompson tracked her with the peripheral vision every guard develops. You learn to watch without appearing to watch. She stepped to the white line, testing with one foot, then both, then crossed completely before walking directly toward Thompson with the casual confidence of someone who had decided rules were merely suggestions for other people. 3 feet away, then 2, then she touched his rifle deliberately, her fingers tracing the barrel while looking directly into his face. And when Thompson commanded stand back from the Queen's Guard, she laughed and made comments that prompted more laughter from her group. Then she touched his uniform, pressing her hand against the red tunic, and when he shouted the warning louder, other tourists stopped to stare as the guide pushed through, calling urgently in Korean, but the woman ignored everyone and stepped even closer until her face was inches from his. And then she did the unthinkable. She touched his face with a casual, condescending pat on the cheek like you'd make to a child, demonstrating ultimate disrespect for a decorated soldier, and Thompson's eyes flickered just enough for anyone watching to see that something fundamental had broken beneath his stoic exterior. The guide grabbed the woman's arm and pulled her back while the tour group dispersed within 30 seconds. But Thompson knew the video from 8 different phones would be online within hours and everywhere by evening. 23 minutes later, when relief came, Thompson filed his clinical incident report, but what it could uncapture was the feeling of being reduced from person to thing. Yet Metropolitan Police officers had already observed everything and were reviewing CCTV footage that revealed this was her first violation that morning. Earlier footage showed her crossing lines at other posts, attempting to touch horses, creating a pattern of deliberate provocation rather than cultural misunderstanding. And the decision to act came from high up the chain because this crossed a line threatening the institution itself. At 11:45 hours, Metropolitan Police officers approached the woman and 3 group members as they exited a museum near Trafalgar Square, their vacation continuing as if nothing had happened. "Excuse me, madame, we need to speak with you regarding an incident at Buckingham Palace this morning." The woman's confidence evaporated instantly, replaced by confusion and dawning realization that there might actually be consequences, and she initially claimed not to understand English despite having spoken it clearly in the viral videos. When shown CCTV photographs capturing her face during multiple violations, she switched to claiming ignorance, that she'd done anything wrong, and that the guard had warned her, so officers played the audio of 3 clear warnings with volume beyond any reasonable claim of misunderstanding. "What country are you visiting from?" The answer surprised everyone. Not Chinese as assumed, but South Korean. Traveling with 2 cousins and a friend who were all accomplished professionals, a corporate attorney, marketing executive, university professor, and medical researcher who absolutely knew better. In the detention room at the police station, the woman sat across from two officers and a Crown Prosecution Service representative who laid out the legal situation with businesslike clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. Under Section 39 of the Criminal Justice Act, common assault is committed when a person causes another to apprehend immediate unlawful violence, and we have extensive video evidence of multiple physical contacts after 3 clear verbal warnings. The CPS representative explained as the woman's face went pale. Section 42 of the Armed Forces Act makes it an offense to interfere with armed forces in execution of duty, including ceremonial duties, with maximum penalty of 6 months imprisonment or £5,000 fine, and the Public Order Act covers behavior causing harassment or distress. The fact this was viewed by 2.3 million people means we're re-looking at charges related to bringing the armed forces into disrepute, and intent is not a defense because what matters is action and impact. The senior officer leaned forward. "You being formally cautioned for assault and public order violation. This goes on your permanent record. That appears in background checks and may affect future visa applications, plus you're paying £1,500 before leaving the country non-negotiably. You're writing a formal apology letter to Lance Sergeant Thompson. Yes, we're using his name because you made him public, acknowledging what you did without excuse, and you're making a public statement on the same social media accounts explaining you were wrong, cautioned by police, and hoping others learn from your mistake, without framing yourself as a victim." The public statement went live at 17:45 hours that same day, uploaded from what appeared to be a hotel room where the woman sat with her face blotchy from crying and her English stilted but understandable as she read from prepared notes. "I want to apologize for my behavior at Buckingham Palace today, where I touched a guard without permission and ignored his warnings, and what I did was disrespectful and wrong." She began, struggling to maintain composure. "I have been spoken to by police and I accept full responsibility for my actions without making excuses, and I am sorry to the guard, to the British Army, and to everyone who was upset by what they saw me do in those videos. Please do not do what I did, because these are real soldiers who have served their country and they deserve respect, not to be treated like props or attractions for social media content." The video was short, less than 2 minutes total, but its impact was immediate and far more powerful than anyone anticipated, spreading even faster than the original incident footage. Within hours, it had been viewed more times than the original incident videos combined, and comments flooded in from around the world, some supportive, many angry, all passionate about the broader issues this case represented. The focus of online discourse shifted dramatically from "look at this funny interaction with a guard" to serious discussions about accountability, respect for military personnel, and appropriate tourist behavior. Other tourists who had posted similar boundary-crossing videos began quietly deleting them from their accounts, and tour companies added explicit warnings about respecting the guards' boundaries to their pre-tour briefings and printed materials. Major travel websites updated their London guides to include detailed information about proper behavior around ceremonial military personnel, with some adding warnings about potential legal consequences for violations. And the financial consequences didn't stop at the woman's £1,500 fine. The ripple effect spread far wider than anyone initially expected and sent a message to the entire tourism industry. The tour company faced an investigation by the UK Border Agency regarding their guides' failure to properly control the group and ensure compliance with local laws and regulations. Their operating license for conducting tours in London was suspended pending review, which meant immediate loss of revenue and potential permanent damage to their business reputation in a competitive market. The 3 other members of the group who had filmed the incident and encouraged the behavior each received their own formal cautions and smaller fines of £500 each for being accessories to the violation. The total cost of those few minutes of disrespectful behavior, nearly £4,000 in direct fines to individuals, approximately £30, zero in lost business for the tour company over the suspension period, and permanent marks on 4 people's legal records that could affect them for years. But perhaps more significantly than the financial penalties, the incident became an official case study used for training purposes across multiple organizations and government departments. Metropolitan Police began incorporating the footage into training sessions for officers assigned to tourist-heavy areas. This is what escalation looks like. This is when you need to intervene actively, rather than just observe and hope the situation resolves itself. The Ministry of Defense incorporated the incident into briefings for guards rotating onto ceremonial duties. "You are not required to tolerate assault or harassment. You have the right to call for assistance, and your silence is not consent to being touched or disrespected." And Thompson himself returned to duty 3 days later at the same post, wearing the same uniform, maintaining the same perfect stillness, but something had fundamentally changed in the atmosphere around the guard posts. The other tourists could sense it immediately, a subtle shift from treating the guards as entertainment to recognizing them as actual military personnel, deserving of respect and personal space. The phones still came out for photos and tourists still marveled at the elaborate uniforms, but people stayed behind the white lines now without needing to be told or warned. And when someone inevitably tested the boundaries, because there's always someone who thinks rules don't apply to them, the response was swift and came not just from guards but from other tourists who would actually speak up. Do that, stay back, show some respect. The crowd had become self-policing, which was perhaps the most significant outcome of the entire incident because it suggested a genuine cultural shift rather than just fear of punishment. 6 months after the incident, Metropolitan Police released comprehensive data showing verbal warnings down 67%, physical contact incidents down 83%, and 12 tour companies sanctioned for inadequate supervision. The numbers suggested significant improvement in tourist behavior, but the crowds near ceremonial sites had also measurably thinned as some tourists and tour operators decided to avoid potential legal liability entirely. Some observers saw this as complete success because guards could perform duties with less harassment, while others saw it as fundamental failure because creating distance defeated the purpose of accessible ceremonial traditions. But the most interesting development came from former guards who formed the Ceremonial Duties Dignity Initiative to educate the public through viral videos, showing intensive training, interviews with soldiers discussing their experiences, and stories of combat veterans explaining why ceremonial duty demands discipline equal to active combat. One former lance corporal captured it perfectly. People think we re-statues and forget we re-soldiers, but being a statue is actually harder because in combat you can react and fight back. But on ceremonial duty you have to absorb everything, every insult, every violation with perfect composure. And that's not easier than combat, it's just a different kind of battle. The message resonated powerfully, slowly shifting discourse from content to be captured to people to be respected, and tourists began reconsidering their behavior not just from fear of fines but from genuinely seeing the person inside the uniform. Today at Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle you'll notice a subtle but unmistakable change in atmosphere. The white lines are still there, guards still stand with rigid discipline, tourists still take photos, but crowds now approach differently with more awareness and genuine respect. Not universal respect because there are still weekly incidents, but the response is different now with other tourists intervening, guards calling for backup without hesitation, and officers acting swiftly to remove problem individuals. Thompson still serves and has been promoted to corporal, primarily assigned to training duties but occasionally taking ceremonial shifts with the same perfect stillness that defined his service. He never speaks publicly about the incident, but when junior guards asked for advice before their first ceremonial rotation, he tells them, remember, you're representing something larger than yourself, the uniform, the regiment, the tradition, and all of that matters deeply, but you matter too as a person and as a soldier. And you're never just a prop because you're a soldier first. The junior guards listen with varying degrees of understanding. Some comprehend immediately while others woe and fully grasp the lesson until they're re-standing post and someone crosses that line, forcing them to choose between dignity and discipline. That's the real test of ceremonial duty, not the physical demands or boredom or weather, but maintaining your sense of self when others have decided you're not a person. Holding the line when everything screams to reassert your humanity through force. Most guards pass this test by standing still and fulfilling their duty, becoming part of that unbroken chain of service stretching back through centuries, but they remember forever the moment when someone treated them as less than human and they chose silence over self-defense. The woman who touched Thompson's face has never returned to the United Kingdom. Her social media is now private, and the apology video remains online with comments disabled while the fine was paid and the caution stays on her permanent record. Tour group members later admitted they were embarrassed not just by her actions but by their own participation, with one saying, I would never touch a police officer back home, but somehow because he was in that uniform and couldn't move and everyone was taking photos, it felt different, like he wasn't really a person. Which is horrible to admit, but that's what I felt in the moment. This captures the heart of the issue. The uniform meant to command respect becomes permission for disrespect, and the discipline meant to inspire awe invites exploitation by people who forget their SAE. Human being absorbing everything. The deepest solution is cultural shift toward genuine respect. But you can't legislate respect or fine someone into understanding why their actions matter. You can only create conditions where respect becomes the norm and boundary violations meet swift consequences from both authorities and the crowd itself. And maybe, just maybe, that's already happening through the combined effects of high-profile prosecutions, viral apology videos, education campaigns, and millions of small moments where tourists choose respect over entertainment. Slowly and imperfectly but steadily building towards something better. Everyday guards stand their posts representing their regiments through ceremonial duties that connect modern service to centuries of tradition, while tourists arrive with cameras and curiosity. And someone inevitably tests boundaries thinking rules don't apply to them personally. And everyday soldiers like Thompson choose to maintain composure and uphold professional standards even when doing so requires absorbing disrespect that would break people with less training and discipline. They deserve better than barriers that admit defeat or fines that reduce respect to transactions. They deserve basic human respect based on recognizing their service and fundamental humanity beneath the ceremonial uniform. The guard gave a warning that should have been heeded. The line was crossed anyway by someone who thought there would be no consequences, and everyone watching faced a choice about what kind of society they wanted to live in. Some chose wisely by speaking up and supporting enforcement of boundaries that protect human dignity, while others did not and now live with permanent consequences recorded in official records and internet archives. But the guards themselves keep standing regardless of how they're treated, keep serving with honor, keep maintaining the standards that define their regiments, because that's what soldiers do when they take an oath and put on the uniform.